Is this a mistake? Samantha whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. She stood in front of the cafe, her baby in one arm, the weight of the world on her shoulders. She'd never imagined herself in this situation. She had agreed to this blind date, but now, standing outside, she felt more lost than ever. The small bundle in her arms, the little face staring up at her, made her question everything. Could this be the day everything changes? She wasn't sure. All she knew was that her life had been full of mistakes, and this felt like another one. But she had to try. She needed this, for her daughter's sake. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken questions. Samantha could feel the weight of Ethan's gaze on her and Lily, his eyes lingering on her daughter, now wide with confusion. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, trying to understand what was happening. Ethan blinked rapidly, as if he were waking from a daze. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice low, almost apologetic. "I didn't mean to stare." Samantha could feel her heart pounding in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. "It's okay," she replied, though her voice wavered slightly. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that there was something he knew, something he wasn't telling her. Ethan cleared his throat, his eyes flickering from Lily's face back to Samantha's. She has your eyes," he said quietly, almost as if speaking to himself. Samantha's breath caught. Her mind raced. Could it really be? She had never thought much about Lily's features before. She had always been so focused on getting by, surviving. But now, sitting in front of this stranger, everything seemed to shift. Could Ethan know something she didn't? Was he somehow connected to her past? She swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan hesitated, his fingers drumming lightly on the edge of the table. "I don't know. It's just, the eyes." His gaze seemed to soften as he looked at Lily, but his expression was still clouded with uncertainty. Samantha could feel the tension building between them, an invisible thread pulling them closer, yet keeping them apart. "Are you sure?" she asked, trying to mask the panic rising within her. Ethan's lips parted, but he seemed unsure of what to say. The moment stretched, the words hanging in the air like a question neither of them could answer. "It's nothing," he finally said, shaking his head as if trying to dismiss the thought. "I must be imagining things." But the doubt in his eyes told a different story. Samantha couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in her chest, the unsettling thought that there was something more to this encounter than a simple blind date. She had heard stories before, stories about chance meetings, about lives intertwining in ways no one could have predicted. Was this one of those stories? Or was it just another mistake? Her heart raced as she looked down at Lily, who was now fast asleep, oblivious to the heavy air surrounding them. Samantha's mind began to wander, thinking back to the past, to the decisions she had made, to the secrets she had buried deep within her. Could Ethan be connected to those secrets? The thought was almost too much to bear. "Are you all right?" Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts. She blinked, realizing she had been lost in her own mind for far too long. "Yeah," she replied quickly, forcing a smile. "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. Nothing about this felt fine. The more she looked at Ethan, the more she couldn't shake the feeling that this was no accident, no random meeting. There was something more here, something waiting to be uncovered. And whether she was ready for it or not, she knew she would have to face it. Ethan leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, clearly lost in thought as well. The air between them was thick with tension, neither of them willing to break the silence first. Samantha tried to calm her racing heart. This was supposed to be a simple date, a small chance at something better. But now, it felt like everything was on the verge of unraveling. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought it up," Ethan said, breaking the silence at last. "It's just that, there's something about her." Samantha nodded, though her mind was elsewhere. She wasn't sure where this was going, but she couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward Ethan. The questions in her mind grew louder, drowning out everything else. Why did his words feel so heavy? What was it that he wasn't saying? And why did she feel like this meeting was anything but a coincidence? The silence between them lingered, thick with uncertainty. Samantha glanced at Ethan, her eyes searching his face for any sign of clarity. The tension in the air was suffocating. He hadn't spoken for a few minutes, and she could see the confusion clouding his expression. Was it possible he knew something about her, something that could change everything? She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. She had never been good at reading people, but there was something in Ethan's eyes that told her he wasn't just a stranger. He was familiar in a way that unsettled her. Ethan finally spoke, breaking the quiet. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice soft but full of emotion. "I didn't mean to make this awkward. It's just," he trailed off, struggling for the right words. Samantha's heart skipped a beat as she leaned forward slightly. "It's okay," she said, though she wasn't sure if it was. "I don't know what you're talking about, but," she paused, her voice faltering. "But it feels like something is going on here, something I don't understand." Ethan's eyes widened, and for a moment, there was a flash of something, recognition, perhaps, or regret. He ran a hand through his hair, his fingers gripping tightly as if trying to ground himself. "I think," he stopped again, as if hesitant to continue. Samantha held her breath. "You think what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze dropping to the table before returning to hers. "I think I might know who you are," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. Samantha felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" she asked, her pulse quickening. Ethan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple as if searching for the right words. "I don't know how to say this, but, the baby. Lily. She looks so much like someone I used to know." Samantha's chest tightened. Was this a coincidence? Was it possible that this man, this stranger sitting across from her, could know someone from her past? She had moved on from everything, her old life, her old relationships. She had kept her distance from everything that hurt her. And now, here he was, a man who seemed to recognize something in her daughter that she hadn't even realized herself. She shook her head, her voice trembling. "That's impossible," she said, though she wasn't sure if she was convincing herself or him. Ethan stared at her, his expression unreadable. "I'm not saying it's a definite, but there's something about her," he insisted. "I can't explain it." Samantha felt a wave of panic rising within her. Could this be real? Could it be true? Or was Ethan simply projecting something onto her and Lily that wasn't there? "Who do you think she looks like?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Ethan hesitated, then spoke quietly. "My mother," he said, his tone softer now. "My mother used to have eyes like hers." Samantha froze. She couldn't breathe. Her mind raced, trying to process his words. Eyes like hers. Was it possible? She had never heard Ethan mention his family, not once. But the mention of his mother, the connection to her daughter's eyes, it was all too much to ignore. She had to know more, but at the same time, she was afraid of what the answers might reveal. The room seemed to close in on her as she tried to make sense of everything. Was Ethan really connected to her past, to the father she had left behind, to the man who had hurt her? Or was this just a strange twist of fate? She looked down at Lily, still sleeping peacefully in her arms, unaware of the whirlwind of emotions raging around her. "Are you sure?" Samantha asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. "I can't be certain, but there's something about her, the eyes. It's too strong to ignore." Samantha's mind was spinning. She didn't know what to think, what to feel. Everything she had built, everything she had fought for, seemed to be unraveling before her eyes. She had never asked for any of this, never imagined her life would take such an unexpected turn. But as Ethan looked at her, his expression filled with confusion and something else, something that almost looked like hope. Samantha knew that whatever was happening, it wasn't a coincidence. She wasn't sure where this would lead, but she knew one thing for certain: her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even begin to understand. The weight of Ethan's words hung in the air like an unspoken truth, pulling at Samantha's chest with a heavy force. She could feel the heat of his gaze on her, but her mind was too clouded to process anything clearly. Her heart raced, and her throat tightened as she looked down at Lily, the child who had never known her father, the child who had been the center of her world. Was it possible that Lily's father was someone she had never even considered? The thought sent a chill down her spine. She struggled to maintain control, but the possibility of what Ethan was implying seemed too overwhelming to dismiss. She had spent so long building walls around her heart, locking away her past, and now here it was, threatening to burst through in a way she couldn't control. Ethan was still watching her, his brow furrowed in confusion and concern. "I'm sorry," he said again, his voice softer now, as if he realized how much weight his words carried. "I didn't mean to stir up all of this. It's just, when I saw her, it was like a memory hit me. My mom, she had eyes just like hers." Samantha felt her breath catch in her throat. His mother. The woman he spoke of with such soft reverence, the woman whose memory seemed to haunt him. Could this man, who was so wealthy and distant from her world, really have any connection to her past? To the father of her child? She had never asked for a connection to the past she had left behind. She had built her life from the ground up, one step at a time, determined to never look back. But now, everything seemed to be pulling her back in, whether she was ready or not. "I don't know what to say," Samantha replied, her voice shaky. "I mean, I've never thought about it like that. I didn't even know you were connected to anyone from my past." Ethan's expression softened, and he looked away for a moment, running his hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm not trying to make this more difficult," he said, his voice now filled with regret. I don't know what it means. But there's something about Lily, something that feels like it's right in front of us, but we can't see it." Samantha felt her chest tighten, the air between them growing heavier with each passing second. She didn't know how to respond. She had spent so much time keeping her distance from the past, so much time building walls around herself, and now, in this strange cafe, those walls were starting to crumble. "I don't know what you want from me," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm just a single mom, trying to get by. I don't have any answers, and I don't know what's going on here. I never expected to meet you, let alone hear something like this." Ethan stared at her for a long moment, his eyes searching hers as if he were trying to find the truth. "I'm not asking for answers, Samantha," he said finally. I need to understand. And I think you do too." Samantha shook her head slowly, feeling the weight of his words like an anchor dragging her down. "I don't understand anything right now," she whispered. "Everything is just, too much." The room seemed to close in on her, the noise of the cafe fading into the background as she tried to process everything. Her mind was spinning, unable to find a way to make sense of it all. Ethan leaned forward, his expression earnest. "You don't have to figure it all out right now," he said gently. "But I think we both need to figure out what this is. For Lily's sake, if nothing else." Samantha felt a pang of panic rise in her chest. She hadn't been ready for this. She wasn't sure if she ever would be. But the look in Ethan's eyes, the sincerity of his words, made her wonder if this was something she couldn't ignore. Maybe she wasn't ready for answers, but the questions were there, pulling at her, whether she wanted to face them or not. The connection between them, whatever it was undeniable. And Samantha knew that whatever happened next, her life, her and Lily's life, would never be the same. The days that followed felt like a blur to Samantha. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still see Ethan's face, his expression haunted by something neither of them could fully explain. It wasn't just the confusion or the unease, it was the pull, the undeniable feeling that there was more to this encounter than chance. She had tried to push it all aside, but the questions kept coming. Was Ethan right? Was there truly something about Lily that linked her to him, something neither of them could understand? The more she thought about it, the harder it was to ignore. The truth, or whatever it was that lay hidden just beneath the surface, seemed to be beckoning her. Ethan had said it himself, they needed answers. But what if the answers were too painful to face? What if they uncovered something she wasn't ready to know? Samantha's mind raced as she sat in her apartment that evening, her thoughts tangled and restless. She hadn't wanted to get involved in anything complicated. She had a daughter to raise, bills to pay, and a future that, for the first time in a long time, seemed somewhat stable. But now, everything felt uncertain. She couldn't shake the feeling that meeting Ethan had changed everything, whether she was ready for it or not. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, Ethan's name flashed back at her. For a moment, she hesitated. She hadn't responded to his last message. He had suggested they meet again, but she wasn't sure if she was prepared to face him, or the truth that might lie ahead. With a deep breath, she picked up the phone and tapped out a reply. "I'm not sure what this all means yet, but I'm willing to talk," she wrote, her fingers trembling slightly as she pressed send. Almost immediately, he replied. "Thank you, Samantha. I understand how you must be feeling. I just think we owe it to Lily to figure this out." Samantha stared at his message, her chest tightening. She knew he was right. Lily deserved to know the truth, but Samantha wasn't sure if she was ready to face it herself. The next day, they met at the same cafe. Samantha arrived early, as if trying to prepare herself for what was about to happen. She sat at the same table, her eyes nervously flickering over the empty chair where Ethan would sit. She didn't know what she expected, maybe a sense of closure, maybe answers, or maybe just the courage to move on. When Ethan finally walked in, his gaze immediately found hers. His face was somber, yet there was a softness to it, a sincerity that made Samantha's heart ache. "Hey," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "How are you doing?" Samantha shrugged, forcing a small smile. "I'm here, aren't I?" Ethan nodded, taking a seat across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching between them like an unspoken truth. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Samantha finally said, breaking the quiet. "About Lily and everything." Ethan met her gaze, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and concern. "And?" he prompted gently. "I don't know what it means," Samantha admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "But there's something about this, about what's happening between us. I don't understand it, but I think we need to figure it out." Ethan's eyes softened. "I don't have all the answers either," he said, his voice low. "But I think we can figure this out together." Samantha felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't sure what he meant by that, or what he expected. But something about his words, the sincerity in his voice, made her believe it was worth exploring. The truth, whatever it was, could no longer stay hidden. She didn't know where this path would lead, but she was willing to take the first step. For Lily. For herself. And for whatever answers they could find in the uncertainty that loomed ahead. The next few days passed in a blur, but Samantha's thoughts were clearer than ever. After her conversation with Ethan at the cafe, she couldn't stop thinking about the possibility of what he'd said. There was a connection, something beyond what either of them had anticipated. But the question remained, what did it mean for her and Lily? Samantha had always kept her life simple, her focus always on her daughter. There wasn't room for complications, for anything that might distract her from her mission, providing a better life for Lily. But now, everything seemed more complicated than ever, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized that avoiding the truth wouldn't change it. Ethan had reached out again. He wanted to meet, to talk more, to explore this strange pull they both felt. Samantha had agreed. She had to know if there was something deeper to this connection, or if it was just some weird coincidence that they kept crossing paths. She couldn't deny the curiosity that bubbled up inside her every time she thought about him. Maybe it wasn't just the connection with Lily's eyes, maybe it was more. She wasn't sure yet, but she was willing to find out. As she walked into the cafe that afternoon, she saw him already sitting at their usual table, a familiar look of quiet intensity on his face. Ethan looked up when she entered, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. It was as if neither of them knew what to say, but the unspoken words filled the space between them. "Hey," Samantha said softly, sitting down across from him. She felt the familiar weight in her chest, but there was something different this time, something lighter, like she was finally ready to hear what he had to say. "Hi," Ethan replied, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He looked more relaxed today, less burdened by whatever had been weighing on him in their previous meeting. "I'm glad you came," he continued. "I think we're getting closer to understanding this, whatever this is between us." Samantha nodded, her hands nervously fidgeting in her lap. "I don't know what I'm expecting, but I know I can't ignore it anymore. I need to understand." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a softer tone. "It's not easy, I know. But I really believe there's something here, something we need to figure out. And I think it's not just about us, it's about Lily, too." Samantha's heart skipped a beat at the mention of her daughter. "You think Lily's involved in all of this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan looked at her with deep, understanding eyes. "I do. I don't know how or why, but something in my gut tells me she's a bigger part of this than we realize. I can't explain it, but I'm willing to find out." Samantha's mind raced. She had always been protective of Lily, always careful to keep her out of situations that might bring more hurt into their lives. But now, with Ethan's words hanging in the air, she felt the weight of something she couldn't deny. Lily was part of this puzzle, whether she wanted it or not. "I don't know where this is going," Samantha said quietly, "but I do know that I can't do this alone. I've been doing everything on my own for so long, and I don't know if I'm ready to let someone in." Ethan's gaze softened, and he gave a small nod. "You don't have to do this alone, Samantha. I'm not asking for anything from you. I just want to help, to figure this out with you. We don't have to rush it. We'll take it one step at a time." Samantha looked at him, and for the first time in days, she felt a sense of calm. Maybe she didn't have all the answers yet, and maybe she wasn't ready to face everything that was still unknown. But with Ethan, she didn't feel like she had to carry the weight of it all by herself anymore. For the first time in a long time, Samantha allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. She didn't know where this would lead, but she was willing to find out. For herself. For Lily. And maybe, for Ethan too. The days following their meeting at the cafe were filled with a whirlwind of emotions for Samantha. The conversation with Ethan had stirred something deep inside her, something she couldn't easily dismiss. She found herself wondering if he was right, if there was truly a connection between him and Lily, a connection she had never considered before. She tried to distract herself, focusing on her daily routine with Lily, but it was impossible to ignore the questions that had taken root in her mind. She couldn't help but feel that this was bigger than her and Ethan. That there was something at play here that neither of them could explain. She had never been one to seek answers from others, especially when it came to her past. But now, it felt like those answers were right in front of her, waiting to be uncovered. The tension between her need for clarity and her fear of what the truth might reveal weighed heavily on her. As much as she tried to avoid it, she knew she couldn't keep pushing it away forever. Ethan had made it clear that he wanted to help, that he believed they needed to figure this out together. But was she ready to confront the unknown? Was she prepared to dive into the past she had worked so hard to leave behind? That evening, after putting Lily to bed, Samantha sat down at the kitchen table with her phone in hand. She stared at Ethan's number, her thumb hovering over the screen. She had told herself she would take things one step at But now, as the silence of the apartment surrounded her, she knew it was time to make a decision. She took a deep breath and tapped out a message. I think it's time to talk. I'm ready to meet again. She sent it before she could second-guess herself. Almost instantly, Ethan replied. I'm glad. Let's meet tomorrow, same place, same time. We'll figure this out, I promise. His words brought a sense of relief and anxiety all at once. The next day, she arrived at the cafe early, her heart pounding with anticipation. She hadn't seen Ethan since their last conversation, and now, as she sat at the familiar table, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was the turning point. This was the moment where everything could change. When Ethan arrived, he looked more serious than usual, his expression focused. He took a seat across from her, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet intensity. Samantha, he began, his voice low, I know this is all happening fast, but I feel like we're on the brink of something important. And I want you to know, I'm here for you. I'm here to help, no matter what. Samantha nodded, her throat tight. I don't know if I'm ready for everything, but I know I can't keep pretending like nothing's happening. I have to know the truth. For Lily. Ethan reached across the table, his hand resting lightly on hers. His touch was warm, steady, and it gave her the courage she needed. We'll do this together, he said softly. We'll figure it out. Samantha looked at him, her mind racing. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself? The weight of what they were about to uncover was daunting, but in that moment, she knew she couldn't keep running from it. She had to face it, whatever it was. I'm ready, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan smiled, a reassuring and comforting smile that made Samantha feel like she wasn't alone in this. They sat there for a moment, the world outside the cafe continuing on as usual, but for them, everything had changed. Whatever this was, whatever truth lay ahead, they were going to face it together. The following week felt like an eternity for Samantha. Each day dragged on, weighed down by the uncertainty of what lay ahead. She found herself constantly distracted, her thoughts swirling around the decision she had made. Meeting Ethan again, agreeing to delve into the mystery of her daughter's eyes, was something she couldn't take back now. It was too late to go back to the life she had before. She had already taken the first step, and now she had to see it through. She tried to focus on Lily, on the small moments of joy that still filled her days. But the questions loomed large in her mind. Could Ethan be telling the truth? Was there something between him and Lily that went beyond coincidence? She didn't know what to believe anymore, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she couldn't continue ignoring the signs. Ethan's presence in her life had already shifted something inside her, and she had to know why. She had to find out what was really happening. It was a Saturday afternoon when she met Ethan again. The cafe was quieter than usual, the hum of conversation replaced by soft music playing in the background. Ethan was already there when she arrived, sitting at their usual table, his gaze fixed on something in front of him, deep in thought. He looked up when she walked in, a small, knowing smile crossing his face. Hi, he said softly, standing up to greet her. Samantha smiled back, though it felt a little strained. Hey, she replied, sitting down across from him. I've been thinking, she started, her voice unsure, about everything you said. About Lily. Ethan nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. I know this is a lot to process. I just want you to know I'm not rushing you. We'll take this one step at a time, together. Samantha felt a lump form in her throat. It wasn't that she didn't want to believe him, it was that everything was happening so fast, and she wasn't sure how to handle it. I don't know where to start, she admitted. I've spent so long keeping my distance from my past. From everything I left behind. But now, it feels like it's all coming back, and I don't know what to do with it. Ethan's expression softened. I understand. But whatever happens, we'll face it together. We'll figure it out, no matter what it means for us. Samantha nodded slowly, her thoughts racing. She had been so focused on surviving, on making sure Lily had everything she needed, that she hadn't allowed herself to think about the bigger picture. She hadn't allowed herself to think about the past, about the man who might be connected to her daughter in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. But now, she had to. "I don't know if I'm ready to face everything," Samantha said, her voice trembling slightly. "But I want to. For Lily." Ethan's eyes shone with something like determination. "We'll take it slow. You don't have to have all the answers right now. We'll just take it one step at a time." Samantha took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't alone. "Okay," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "One step at a time." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared commitment hanging in the air between them. Samantha knew that the road ahead would be complicated, but for the first time, she felt like she was ready to face it. With Ethan by her side, maybe, just maybe, they could uncover the truth. She wasn't sure where this would lead, but she knew that for Lily, she had to try. Whatever it took, she would see this through. She would finally confront the past she had spent so long running from. The next few days were filled with quiet anticipation. Samantha had agreed to meet Ethan again, but this time, she wasn't sure what to expect. She had told herself that she was ready to face whatever lay ahead, but as the day approached, the weight of the unknown settled heavily on her shoulders. She had no idea where this journey would lead, and the uncertainty made her anxious. But she couldn't turn back now. For Lily, she had to keep going. She had already opened the door to something bigger than she had ever imagined. Ethan had suggested they meet at a different cafe this time, a quiet spot outside the city where they could talk without interruptions. Samantha arrived early, her nerves fraying as she sat in the corner booth, her eyes scanning the room. She didn't know what was going to happen, but she knew it was time to get the answers she had been avoiding for so long. As the minutes passed, she heard the soft jingle of the door opening. She looked up and saw Ethan walking toward her, his expression serious, yet warm. When he sat down across from her, his eyes locked with hers, and for a brief moment, they both said nothing. The silence between them was comfortable, almost as if they had both been preparing for this conversation in their own way. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice gentle but firm. "Samantha, I know this is hard," he began, his gaze unwavering, "but I think we need to take the next step. We need to find out what this means for you and Lily." Samantha nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She had known this was coming, but hearing it out loud made it all the more real. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I'm walking into." Ethan's face softened, and he reached across the table, his hand resting on hers. "I get it," he said quietly. "But whatever happens, you're not alone in this. We'll do it together." Samantha looked down at their hands, the simple gesture of his touch offering more comfort than she expected. She had spent so long alone, carrying the burden of everything by herself, that the idea of sharing this with someone felt foreign. But it also felt right. She had to believe that. "Okay," she whispered, taking a deep breath. "Let's do it." Ethan smiled, the kind of smile that made her feel like she had made the right choice. "We'll start with the truth," he said, "and we'll go from there." Samantha wasn't sure what to expect next. Was this the moment everything would change? Would the truth be more than she was prepared to handle? The questions flooded her mind, but one thing was clear, she was finally ready to face them. She had spent so many years building walls, locking away her past, and hiding from the unknown. But now, with Ethan by her side, she felt a glimmer of hope. She had to believe that whatever came next, it would be worth it. For Lily. For her future. For the chance to finally understand the truth. As they sat there, the air between them filled with anticipation, Samantha felt a small sense of relief. She wasn't alone. And that, for the first time in a long time, felt like enough. The following days were filled with a nervous anticipation that Samantha couldn't shake. She had agreed to Ethan's proposal, but each moment leading up to their meeting made her wonder what the truth would bring. The idea of uncovering something from the past that could change everything was both terrifying and thrilling. She had spent so many years hiding behind walls, keeping everything from falling apart, but now, those walls were beginning to crumble. Ethan was right, they had to find out the truth, and for the first time, she wasn't alone in the process. She had always carried the burden of uncertainty alone, but with Ethan by her side, that weight felt a little lighter. The day of their meeting arrived, and Samantha couldn't shake the nervous energy building up inside her. She had promised herself she would be ready to face whatever came next, but the closer she got to the cafe, the more doubts crept in. What if the truth was something she couldn't handle? What if it changed everything forever? She shook her head as she stepped inside, pushing away the doubt. She had to do this, for herself, for Lily, and for the chance to finally know who she was, beyond all the walls she had built. Ethan was already sitting at their usual table when she arrived. He looked up as she walked in, and for a moment, their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. He smiled, his expression more relaxed than she had seen before. "Hey," he said, his voice gentle, as he stood to greet her. "Hey," she replied, her voice a little shakier than she had intended. She sat down, folding her hands tightly in her lap as she gathered her thoughts. "I've been thinking a lot about what we're doing," she began, her voice quieter than usual. "I don't know if I'm ready for everything, but I think I'm ready to take the next step. I want to know the truth, no matter how hard it is." Ethan nodded, his eyes filled with warmth. "You don't have to be ready all at once," he said softly. "We'll go at your pace. But the fact that you're willing to take this step is all that matters. We'll figure it out together." Samantha smiled faintly, grateful for his patience. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. This was it. There was no turning back now. "I just need to know where to start," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't even know what the truth is yet." Ethan leaned forward, his hands resting on the table, his gaze intense. "We start by looking at what's right in front of us. You, me, and Lily. Everything's connected, Samantha. And I think we need to face it head-on." Samantha felt a knot form in her stomach. Could this really be true? Could her past and Ethan's life be so intricately linked? She wasn't sure, but the longer she sat there with him, the more she realized that it didn't matter how hard it was. She couldn't keep avoiding it. She had to know. "Okay," she said, her voice steady now, "let's do this. Let's find out the truth." Ethan smiled, a reassuring smile that made her feel like they were on the same team. "We're in this together," he said softly. For the first time in a long while, Samantha felt a small sense of hope. Whatever came next, she knew she wasn't alone in it. And maybe, just maybe, that would make all the difference. The days that followed felt like a mix of anticipation and nervous energy. Samantha couldn't shake the thoughts swirling in her mind. She had taken the first step by agreeing to meet Ethan again, and now she found herself at the edge of something bigger than she could have ever imagined. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but the weight of the unknown had already started to pull her in. As the morning of their next meeting arrived, she found herself pacing around her small apartment, trying to steady her breath. It wasn't just the questions about Lily and Ethan, but the fear of what this new chapter in her life might bring. She had spent so many years building a life on her own, keeping everything locked up tight, and now, the door was cracked open. She wasn't sure what would come through, but she knew it was time to face it. She grabbed her purse and made her way to the cafe. When she arrived, she saw Ethan already sitting at the table. He looked up as she walked in, his eyes lighting up with a warmth that made her chest tighten. Samantha took a deep breath and sat down across from him. "Hey," she said quietly, forcing a smile. "Hey," Ethan replied, his voice calm, reassuring. "I'm glad you're here." There was something about his presence that made her feel a little more at ease, but the questions still lingered in her mind, unanswered. "I've been thinking," Samantha began, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "I don't know where to start, but I know I need to do this. I can't keep pretending I don't want to know the truth. About Lily. About everything." Ethan nodded, his expression softening. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," he said, his tone gentle. "We'll go at your pace. I just want you to know you're not alone in this." Samantha took a deep breath, the weight of his words sinking in. For the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't carrying the weight of everything by herself. She wasn't ready to dive into the past, but she couldn't ignore the pull to understand the connection between Lily and Ethan. "I guess I've been afraid of what the truth might mean," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to risk losing everything I've worked so hard for." Ethan's eyes softened as he listened. "You don't have to lose anything, Samantha. The truth doesn't have to take away what you have. It's just part of understanding who you are and where you come from." Samantha's mind raced as she absorbed his words. Was it really that simple? She had always been so focused on keeping things together, on protecting Lily, that she had never allowed herself to explore the unknown. But now, with Ethan by her side, it seemed like she might finally have the chance to face it. "I don't know if I can handle everything," Samantha said, the vulnerability in her voice clear. "But I'm willing to try. For Lily." Ethan reached across the table, his hand resting gently on hers. "We'll do it together. Whatever happens, we'll take it one step at a time." Samantha looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never allowed herself to hope for something like this. To think that someone could be there for her, to help her navigate the unknown. But as she looked into Ethan's eyes, she realized that this was her chance to face the truth. For Lily. For herself. And for the future that was still uncertain, but somehow, more hopeful than ever. The next few days felt like a waiting game. Samantha spent most of her time with Lily, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy while the thoughts of what was to come constantly buzzed in her mind. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she had already made the decision to move forward. The truth was something she couldn't avoid anymore, no matter how much she tried. She had to face it, even if it meant confronting things she wasn't prepared for. When the day came to meet Ethan again, she felt a mixture of nerves and determination. She had promised herself that she would not let fear control her. Ethan had been nothing but kind and patient, offering support in a way she had never experienced before. She arrived at the cafe early, finding a quiet corner where she could sit and gather her thoughts. She had no idea what would happen during this meeting, but something inside her told her that it was the beginning of something important. Ethan arrived a few minutes later, his familiar presence immediately putting her at ease. He gave her a gentle smile as he sat down across from her, his eyes filled with understanding. "Hey," he said softly. "How are you doing?" Samantha shrugged, forcing a smile. "I'm all right," she replied, though her voice wavered slightly. "Just thinking a lot." Ethan nodded, his expression serious. "I know. This isn't easy. But I want you to know that whatever happens, we'll face it together." Samantha looked at him, her heart racing. She had never been good at letting people in, but there was something about Ethan that made her feel like maybe it was time to trust someone again. "I'm ready," she said quietly. "I want to know what this is. I need to know." Ethan smiled, the warmth in his eyes reassuring her. "We'll take it slow," he said. "One step at a time." Samantha took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what they were about to do. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she wasn't carrying the burden alone. It was still a lot to process, but having Ethan by her side made it a little less overwhelming. "So, what now?" Samantha asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her chest. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his eyes focused on her. "We start by understanding what brought us here," he said. We know there's something connecting Lily and me, and we need to figure out what it is. I'm not sure what it will mean, but we can't ignore it. Samantha nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. She had never imagined her life would lead her here, to this moment where everything seemed like it could change. She thought of Lily, her bright eyes, and the connection that Ethan seemed to see in her. Could there really be something to this? I don't know where this leads, Samantha said, her voice trembling slightly. But I want to find out. I need to know the truth. Ethan reached across the table, his hand gently resting on hers. We'll do it together, Samantha. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. You're not alone in this. Samantha felt a rush of emotion, a sense of relief she hadn't expected. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. Maybe the truth wasn't something to fear after all. Maybe it was the key to understanding everything she had worked so hard to protect. She squeezed his hand, her heart finally starting to feel a little lighter. Okay, she whispered. Let's do this. The weeks that followed felt like an emotional roller coaster for Samantha. Every day, the uncertainty of what they had uncovered weighed heavily on her. Despite Ethan's reassuring presence, she couldn't escape the deep-rooted fear of what this truth might bring. She had always kept herself and Lily safe from the unknown, but now the unknown was closing in, and it wasn't something she could avoid any longer. She thought about the moment they had shared at the cafe, when she had finally admitted to Ethan that she was ready to face whatever came next. The truth was no longer something to fear. It was something she had to understand, not just for herself but for Lily as well. The connection between Ethan and her daughter was undeniable, and yet, the more she thought about it, the more confused she became. Could this really be happening? Was Ethan a part of Lily's past? Was there something about their shared history that she had never known? Samantha couldn't help but replay the conversation they had had that day. Ethan's words echoed in her mind, "We'll take it slow, one step at a time." He had promised they would figure it out together, but the more they uncovered, the more complicated it became. One afternoon, Ethan called. "I think it's time we meet again," he said, his voice serious. "There's something I need to show you." Samantha hesitated for a moment, feeling a wave of apprehension wash over her. "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Ethan sighed on the other end. "I think we're closer to finding the answers, but there's something I need you to see. It could change everything." Samantha's heart skipped a beat. Could this be the moment they had been waiting for? The moment when everything finally made sense? Or would it open a door to something even more complicated than they could imagine? She agreed to meet him. The moment she stepped into the familiar cafe, she felt the weight of the past few weeks pressing down on her. Ethan was already sitting at their usual table, his expression more serious than usual. He looked up as she walked in, his eyes filled with something that looked like both determination and fear. "Sit down," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Samantha obeyed, feeling a mix of anxiety and anticipation. "What's going on, Ethan?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan didn't speak immediately. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small folder, placing it gently in front of her. "This," he said, his voice low, "this is the beginning of everything we've been trying to figure out." Samantha looked at the folder, her stomach churning. She had no idea what was inside, but she knew it was the key to everything. With shaking hands, she opened it. The first thing she saw was a photograph, one that took her by surprise. It was a picture of Lily, taken when she was just a baby, sitting in someone's arms. But it wasn't just any photo, it was a photo of her daughter, sitting in the arms of someone Samantha recognized all too well. It was a photo of Ethan's mother. Samantha's breath caught in her throat. This was more than just a coincidence. This was something real. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What does this mean?" Ethan leaned forward, his gaze never leaving her face. It means everything, Samantha. It means there's a connection here that goes deeper than we thought. A connection that I think we both need to understand. Samantha's mind was racing. This was the moment she had been dreading, the moment when everything was revealed. She felt a mixture of fear, confusion, and disbelief, but above all, she felt a deep sense of urgency. She had to know the truth, no matter how overwhelming it might be. "So what now?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Ethan's expression softened, and he reached out, placing his hand gently on hers. "Now," he said quietly, "we figure this out, together. We find out what it means for Lily, for us, and for everything we've been searching for." Samantha nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. She had no idea what the next step would be, but she knew she couldn't stop now. She had come too far to turn back, and whatever truth awaited them, she would face it. For Lily. For herself. For the future that was waiting to be written.